Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm your host, Pamela Price. This is a space and a place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations about law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and everyday events, current events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of the most pressing issues affect real people, real families, and our communities. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of this world. Each episode will tackle an issue, breaking it down in a way that's honest, informative, and actionable. We'll hear from community leaders, lawyers, politicians, educators, healers, and everyday people on the front lines of change. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the weekly show and to my Substack newsletter to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to Pamela Price Unfiltered wherever you listen to your podcast. So welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Let's talk about it. April is Second Chance Month, a time to recognize the importance of reconciliation, redemption, resilience, and the ability of the human capacity to grow beyond our worst mistakes. It's also a moment to highlight and evaluate the systems that too often deny people the opportunity for a second chance to rebuild their lives, especially for Black and Brown communities that have been disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. Our guest today embodies the very essence of what second chances should look like in action, policy, and purpose. Jamilia Land is a visionary champion for justice and a nationally recognized leader in criminal justice reform. She's also the director of the Anti-Violence, Safety, and Accountability Project, known as ASAP, on the front lines supporting families impacted by both gun violence and incarceration. Her work pushes for healing, transparency, and real accountability, not just punishment. She's also the co-founder of the Abolish Slavery National Network and the founder of the National Coalition to End Felony Murder. Through her leadership, Jamilia has influenced and helped shape historic legislation in California, like SB 1437, SB 1421, and SB 300. Bills that have changed lives and created opportunities and the very second chances that we're here to talk about. But her commitment to justice isn't just professional. It's personal, deeply personal. The tragedies and the deaths of close family members by gun violence or incarceration has fueled her mission and elevated her commitment and her voice as a powerful force in the fight for a justice system that values dignity and human life. Jamilia, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered, and thank you for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you. And before we get started, I want to give you your roses, and I want to thank you for everything that you have done for us and our community as a collective. I take my proverbial hat off to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm honored to have you in this conversation about your journey and the work that you're doing across the state of California and across the country, and your vision for how do we get to a society that does allow for second chances. So, Second Chance Month is all about restoring hope and opportunity, but that can mean different things depending on who you are and what you've been through. So tell us about the work you've been doing and your journey to become the leader that you are.
Woo! You asked a loaded question. So I was born and raised here in the wonderful city of Oakland, California. My mother and father were both members of the Black Panther Party for self defense. Excuse me. I also grew up under Muslim leadership in my household, and it was all about community. It was about looking out for one another, taking care of one another. You know, I grew up in a time where if Miss Jenkins' lights were off, we ran that extension cord across the driveway and we made sure that her and those babies had lights for the night until the community could come together and pay her bill. So I've always kind of been a community activist in that way. But it was in 2016 when my son, my adopted son, was arrested for a triple homicide out of South Sacramento. And he was facing life without the possibility of parole. And ultimately, I embarked on a journey to help change California's felony murder law because I knew that was going to be the problem for him. And unfortunately, he was found guilty, even though he was not the person that took anyone's life. And he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 10 years with 5 years time served. And so understanding that this young man had come out of the foster care system, that the systems were broken in regards to how it received and helped our community, it became a passion for me. You know, I got him when he was in the foster care system, about to age out. And he was an amazing, amazing kid, still is, and it was some choices in life. As we talked about before, oftentimes people choose criminal behavior as a form of a coping mechanism, either for unprocessed childhood trauma or out of a necessity in their community. The majority of crimes that we see in our community are economic based. And so here we have a kid who's trying to eat, and he finds himself in a situation, and now he's serving 3 life sentences. And so for me, when we are looking at people like that, and there's several, right? Well, my specialty is felony murder and life without the possibility of parole, because the two go hand in hand. And a lot of people don't understand how egregious felony murder legislation around this country really is, that people can be found guilty for murders that they didn't actually commit. And so for me, for people who are incarcerated, who are wrongfully convicted, or who are actually innocent, second chance is a hard pill to swallow, because they should have a first chance at being able to prove themselves to be innocent. And so wrap it up, second chance for me looks like giving people an opportunity to actually address the issues that created the harm within themselves and then bled out into the community, that ultimately led to really, really bad decisions.
Right. Well, you raise a lot of incredibly important and valid points. Talking about foster kids, I'm a foster kid, so I understand. Foster kids come out, they're confused, they make a lot of mistakes. Talk about trauma that young people go through and how that trauma gets expressed in our community and comes out looking like crime. And then the felony murder rule, which you absolutely correct. It tends to punish the person with the least amount of intent, unintentional killings that persons are involved in, and particularly a kid who makes the wrong choice, does the wrong thing without even really knowing, and they end up with a LWOP sentence. And we know in Alameda County, 82% of the people serving life without parole sentences from our county got those sentences under the age of 21. So it's a travesty that LWOP is primarily designated under the felony murder rule, and it particularly impacts young Black men. And that is the reality of it. And so having second chances, which LWOP doesn't even really, you don't get to that, right?
It's death. It's death by incarceration.
Right.
Let's be very clear for the people who are listening to this that life without the possibility of parole is a death by incarceration sentence. And as you talk about, the age group as well as the ethnic makeup, there's a case I want to just briefly highlight right here. There's a case out of Alabama, a young man named Lakeith Smith. Lakeith was 15 years old. 15. Him and some friends broke into a house trying to steal an Xbox and a TV. Law enforcement was called out. The cop shoots his friend and kills him. They charge this 15-year-old kid under felony murder and convict him and give him 65 years in prison for the cop killing his friend because of felony murder.
Right.
That's problematic. And those are things that people don't know about. People don't know that almost 70% of the women that are incarcerated in California prisons are there on felony murder convictions. Those women, a large percent of those women are also survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. But because of the way legislation is written in this state and in this country, people who are oftentimes victims or survivors of crimes and harm are turned around and punished the same way. So you have a woman who's been sex trafficked, she's a victim, but you're going to turn around, you're going to prosecute her, and you're going to put her in prison. And God forbid that the person who was, exploiting her harm someone in the process or kill someone. Now she's going to prison for felony murder because of something that someone who was harming her did. And these are the conversations that people don't want to have. Okay, because when we start talking about public safety, well, you know what it is. We live in a country that has relegated people who look like you and I to the darkest corner of subhumanity. So for years, we have systematically been conditioned to see Black skin as a threat. So when the news and everything else is showing all of these Black faces, Black men, Black women, Black children, nobody really cares, right? Because, well, we're all whores and prostitutes and pimps and drug dealers and baby mamas and baby daddies, and we have no structure, we have no community, we have no culture. And that is about as far from the truth as it is. But we don't have the resources because we live in a country that our Constitution says we're 3/5 of a human being for purposes of representation. And a socially constructed entity that says our Black eye has no value unless we are a tradable commodity. So that's why legislation like felony murder continues to fuel the prison system, because we have people who are being exploited, which gets into the slavery abolition. Because as long as we can keep these prisons filled with bodies to perform work that can be exploited for the economic gain of either private industries or the state of California, we're going to keep having it. So then where does second chance come in?
Right. So talk about your work with the National Coalition to End Felony Murder. And then I want to get into the anti-slavery movement. But first, let's talk about that.
Okay. So that's a huge thing. So in 2018, several states came together, starting with Colorado, and we formed the Abolish Slavery National Network. And we are a national coalition that to date we have successfully removed involuntary servitude and slavery from 12 respective states' constitutions. We've worked with over 30 states. This year, California, we are on our third go-round to remove involuntary servitude from California's constitution, because a lot of people have the misconception, and what we found to be challenging the most, no matter what state we're in, but especially California, is educating people on what is legal constitutionalized slavery, right? When you say slavery, people think of something old and archaic. And people say, oh, slavery was ended with the passage of the Emancipation. Like, what are you talking about? No, slavery was reconditioned. If you look at the language in the 13th Amendment, it is very clear that slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be permitted except for the punishment of crime. Now, some states like California have altered their language a little bit. So California's constitution reads with they use the punctuation mark, right? So it's got a period. Slavery is not permitted, period. However, involuntary servitude is still permitted if you have been duly convicted of a crime. Well, California is really special in that now I'm about to tell some of our secrets, because this is a part of what I think people need to understand and know. So California is interesting in that not only do we possess this language in our state's constitution, we have gone so far as to codify it in our penal code. So for example, Penal Code Section 2700 states that every able-bodied person incarcerated in a California prison shall perform as many hours of faithful labor each and every day as prescribed by the director of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Now, here's where it gets real interesting, right? Because that director is also known as the secretary of CDCR, aka the top warden. However, there's also another little trick in here. There's an entity called CalPIA, California Prison Industry Authority. CalPIA runs all of the factories inside of our prisons. People don't know we produce everything. eggs, milk, cheese, bread. We package beverages, teas, coffees, sodas. We make road signs. Ever go to the hospital and get that little plastic bag that says property made in a prison? You know the little boxes that they give you with the tissue that says Medline? You should research Medline. Made in a prison. The little drape that they pull, made in a prison. The desks that are in most government buildings, made in prison. And so people don't understand the value, the economic value of California's prison system for the state's overall economy. So when you can justify passing legislation that not only holds people for ridiculous amounts of time or sentences them to things like death by incarceration, how much free labor are you getting?
Right. A lifetime.
You're getting a lifetime of free labor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, 20, 30 years go by and, oh, you know what, we're really sorry. Now that you're 60, 70 years old, and you're further traumatized from being in prison. Let's be clear about that prisons do not rehabilitate people. In fact, they traumatize them and make them worse. I am not saying that I don't believe that there should be accountability in our communities for people who create harm. However, I don't think that putting people in cages and treating them in inhumane fashions, anticipating that they're going to rehabilitate themselves with no services in place to genuinely address the trauma that got them there in the first place, is ever going to do us any good. And so prison and slavery go hand in hand because it's been modified where we see it predominantly now inside of our prison systems. But the last point, CalPIA, California Prison Industry, they have a showroom in Sacramento. But CalPIA has a board, and the board is structured like a corporation. And the chair of the board is appointed by the governor of the state of California. Guess who the chair of CalPIA's board is? You guessed it. The Secretary of CDCR and the same person named in Penal Code Section 2700. So that's a serious issue. When we have one person sitting in three positions that has control over what is happening inside the prisons, not only with what is being produced, but also legislatively being able to force people. And so ACA 3, which was the first iteration of the bill that was brought, came out of COVID. My ex-partner was incarcerated in Lancaster at the time. Lancaster was the first facility to announce that there was an active COVID outbreak, and he was tasked with having to go in and clean the cells and offices of workers. And at that time, nobody really knew what COVID was. He was afraid. And so as we talked about it, he was about 6 months away from going to the parole board. And we knew that if he did not comply, that he'd get hit with a rules violation, what we call the modern day WHIP, 115 rules violation. And what people don't know is that that rules violation, when it goes into your file, they will automatically deny you parole. And the denials start off at 15 years. So, and then depending on mitigating circumstances, they walk it down. So from 15, 10, 7, 5 to 3 years is the minimum that you could get, all for refusing to work. Let's be clear about that. This isn't about, oh, I'm only getting 8 cents an hour and the state is taking 55% of that. This isn't about wages. This isn't about, oh, we don't have any worker protections. People are losing limbs and all kinds of stuff. It's not about that. This is about Penal Code Section 2700, which said you're going to work every single day underneath my direction. I don't care if your mama done died. I don't care if your children are sick. Matter of fact, I don't care if you sick. You're going to get up and you're going to do what it is that this system, this economic engine demands of you to do. All while, and we're going to continue to exploit your families too, with the packages and the phone calls and the visitation and all the other stuff. So overall, the economic engine that this thing is what people really got to look at.
Thank you for that. That is so important. An economic engine is what drives incarceration in California, a major feature. And you're absolutely right. People have no idea. So thank you for giving us that insight and connecting those dots. That's so important. You've played a pivotal role in criminal justice reform. As I mentioned, SB 1437, SB 33, SB 300. Can you share how those laws have helped create second chances for people inside who were once written off by the system?
Yeah, so that's a great one. So SB 1437, as you know, amended California's felony murder law. So what it did was it opened up a door and a pathway for people who had previously been convicted under felony murder, as well. There's a host of things I won't go into it because it'd be too much, but it gave them an opportunity to be resentenced under the new law. And so SB 1437 was vitally important and really personal to me because of what was happening with my son at the time. And at the time that he was arrested, it was a Senate concurrent resolution, and we didn't know if it was actually going to become a bill that we could then get passed. And so I was very hopeful that once we got that bill passed, that at the time of sentencing, he would be able to benefit from it. And what ended up happening was something completely different. He ultimately was convicted under the old law. His trial ended in October. Jerry Brown signed the bill that Wednesday. His trial ended Monday. He signed the bill that Wednesday. January 1st of 2019, it goes into effect January 4th. They sentenced him under the old law.
Wow.
Yeah. So now
a judge made that decision, right?
Yeah. I'm just gonna tell it all, because folks who know me, they know I just don't care. That's why I never do good in certain spots. A white woman who made it very clear that she was not happy about my presence in the courtroom. I was thrown out of the courtroom. The district attorney actually lied and said that he was afraid of me and that I was intimidating him in the hallway. And so they made it very difficult for me. But to put this in context, what was happening at the height of this time, we had the Stephon Clark killing, we had the district attorney's race going, we had the sheriff's race going, we had investigations into the sheriff's offices. Then you've got a triple homicide. You don't get triple homicides very often. And that looked great for a judge who was looking to retire and who misinstructed the jury, who we later came back. We asked for a mistrial 2 or 3 times and it was denied. The judge went on vacation. We had, 2 substitute judges. We had juror misconduct. We had judicial misconduct on the behalf of the judge who was inquiring about the juror misconduct. She went a little too far. But again, the courts say, hey, well, this is what it is. Come back on appeal. And we know what that looks like. And so my son has been sitting in a prison cell for almost 8 years now for a crime that he did not commit. And he has had to endure things that no human being should have to endure. I'm constantly worried about his mental health. I'm worried about suicide. I'm worried about fights. I'm worried about, violations of numerous things. And so it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, because we're hopeful that legislation can help change. But at the end of the day, you can't legislate away racism and hatred in people's hearts. And a lot of this legislation is rooted in systemic racism, whether people want to say it or not.
Right. Well, this is Pamela Price Unfiltered. So thank you for sharing your personal experience with injustice with us. And we know you're absolutely correct. The legislators can pass the laws, but when it comes down to it, what happens, the decisions that are made in the district attorney's office and the rulings that are made by a judge in court is what shapes what justice really looks like for everyday people. So,
and real quick, I want to say this, right? And again, back to thanking you, because there's a lot of people who have seen you in the role of the DA, but I've been fortunate enough to see you as my sister, as a woman, as someone in the community, and you embody these things. And I think that's a part of the problem why people push back on you too, because you came in and you saw some of the things that were going on, and how dare you actually address these things. But I want to thank you on behalf of the people that during your tenure benefited from your insight, from your knowledge and your wisdom, and your fighting for the people even when people didn't want you to. And so for those folks, I thank you. We
Thank
need more
you.
folks like you.
Thank you. Of course, I understood that it's so important to stand up for what you think is right, even if you're standing alone. And fortunately, I was not standing alone inside the Alameda County DA's office. And I am forever grateful for my team that shared the vision, that understood what we were there to do, which was really to do justice for the people. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your
Thank you.
insights and for your work in making the system more humane and for everybody, for all of us, and recognizing the trauma that our community suffers that impacts all of us, and for keeping the faith and doing the work that you do, despite, I'm sure, the criticism and those who
Girl,
want to stop you and stand in your way. I'm so proud of you that you are still
thank you.
standing strong and moving forward and doing everything you can to make the world a better place. So thank you for joining me and for sharing with us on Pamela Price Unfiltered. Welcome to Legally Speaking. April is Second Chance Month. As we discussed in the previous episodes of Pamela Price Unfiltered, the Second Chance Act passed in 2008 and the First Step Act passed in 2018 were national initiatives to repair the devastating harm caused by mass incarceration. Nationally, an estimated 80 million Americans have some type of criminal record. California has been on the path to reducing incarceration since at least 2012. As a result, California's entire sentencing structure has changed over the last 10 years. Midterm presumption for sentencing was a huge change in how people are sentenced. SB 567, enacted in 2021, requires judges to impose a midterm penalty as a punishment, not the harshest penalty when sentencing someone, unless there are aggravating circumstances. And they have to put it on the record. What are the aggravating circumstances? The number of people eligible for resentencing in California because of the many changes in the law has grown far beyond the capacity of most district attorneys' offices to timely process the petitions. There are backlogs in mandatory resentencing in cases across the state. In Alameda County, the new district attorney stopped the resentencing hearings shortly before she took the oath of office, leaving many petitioners, survivors, and the court in limbo for months. But giving people the opportunity to rebuild their lives after serving their sentences goes beyond resentencing. The next essential step is bringing people safely into the community, back into the community, and with the right tools for success. It's called reentry. In Alameda County, as the district attorney, I knew that if you are resentencing people, you need a reentry team. In 2013, then Attorney General Kamala Harris established a division of recidivism, reduction, and reentry, partnering with local district attorneys to focus on the best practices to reduce recidivism. From then until now, the state has recognized that community-based reentry programs are the best and one of the most successful tools in helping formerly incarcerated people become self-sufficient after they get out of prison. According to Cal Matters, CDCR now operates 12 reentry centers across the state for men and women, 6 for men and 6 for women. All of the reentry centers sponsored by CDCR in California are in Southern California, and only 2 of the CDCR reentry centers for women are in Northern California. CDCR regularly reports recidivism rates, meaning arrests, convictions, and returns to prison, through its recidivism data dashboard. In 2021, the state funded a program of the Anti Recidivism Coalition called ARC, and that program was the Hope and Redemption Team called HART, HART. The funding at that time allowed ARC to expand its programming in 31 of California's 33 prisons. HART brings ARC trained life counselors who have served life sentences into CDCR prisons to provide parole board preparation, rehabilitative programming, and reentry support to those who are still incarcerated. The HART program is a 12-week initiative designed to equip incarcerated persons, men and women, with the tools necessary for personal growth, responsibility, and successful reintegration into their community. In 2023, as Alameda County District Attorney, I accepted ARC's invitation to speak at a HART graduation ceremony at Mule Creek State Prison. I took a small team of deputy district attorneys and inspectors with me to the ceremony, and they all reported that it was a life-changing experience. You may ask, how does someone sentenced to life in prison get out of prison in order to be able to come back into prison? Every year, the Board of Prison Terms grants parole to a small number of people serving life sentences. Between 2009 and 2019, the number increased from 600 to 1,250. CDCR estimates that there currently are more than 41,000 persons serving life sentences currently incarcerated who are eligible for parole. And for example, a person sentenced to 15 years to life is considered a person with a life sentence. Under our penal code, a murder, the penalty can be 15 years to life, 25 years to life. It is a life sentence. However, depending on the circumstances, the person may be eligible for parole after they serve the minimum 15 years or the minimum 25 years. Less than 15% of the people who come before the parole board on their first application are actually granted parole. And when denied, they may have to wait years, sometimes up to 15 years, to wait to come back for a second review. In 2020, the California State Legislature passed SB 369, a bill that would create a statewide reentry commission and task it with developing a new health and safety agenda for people returning from prison to their communities, reviewing the barriers to reentry, and coordinating with other entities to establish a grant program for reentry service providers. The authors of the bill identified 44,500 barriers to reentry in California. The commission also would have reviewed the impact of long-term sentences on returning residents, established a clearinghouse of online reentry resources, and published a reentry guidebook. Unfortunately, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed SB 369. Nonetheless, SB 369 provided a framework for us in Alameda County to establish a reentry commission, a countywide community-based reentry commission, which we launched in 2023. The Onward Reentry Pilot Commission was a public, private, and community-based collaboration. Onward was formed to address the 6 critical components in a reentry plan of those being resentenced or released in Alameda County. Onward had 6 teams formed by community organizations, faith-based groups, public employees, and private businesses to serve as collateral support for resentenced individuals. The Onward Reentry Commission brought together representatives from private industry, from public agencies, formerly incarcerated people, community organizations that provide employment, housing, and mentoring services, and county employees. All of these folks came together in the Onward Pilot Reentry Commission to create successful pathways from prison to home for Alameda County residents. Alameda County District Attorney staff included a supervising district attorney, a program specialist for mental health, a senior program specialist for community engagement, and a victim witness advocate. In 2025, the Onward Reentry Commission was disbanded by the new district attorney, Ursula Jones Dixon. Once again, politics trumped public safety in Alameda County. Let's move on to correct the record. She won't prosecute cases. One of the main fear-mongering narratives of Project 2025 used to attack progressive prosecutors is the false narrative that we won't prosecute cases. In Alameda County, this conservative talking point was amplified by none other than the Oakland branch of the NAACP. That branch has often been aligned with the Alameda County Republican Party under the leadership of Bishop Bob Jackson, a prominent Black Republican. In July of 2023, the Oakland NAACP published an open letter under the leadership of Bishop Bob Jackson, Terry Wiley, and Lauren Taylor, both who lost their races in 2022, declaring to the world that as district attorney, I was unwilling, quote, to charge and prosecute people who murder and commit life-threatening serious crimes. Ironically, the Oakland NAACP branch made this malicious allegation without ever talking to me or any one of the members of my executive leadership team, who happen to be primarily well-accomplished Black lawyers and professionals. This soft on crime allegation was not based on any data because there was none available. The district attorney's office did not have a credible system to track charges or cases when we got there. Pleas, convictions, sentences, dismissals, or acquittals are recorded in the court's records, not tracked or recorded by the district attorney's office. In the absence of data, right-wing operatives and the media relied upon anecdotal cases. A handful of cases were sensationalized, and the survivors of homicide victims were easily weaponized in their grief to call for the harshest possible punishment, regardless of the circumstances. In one very high-profile case, the media and the right-wing operatives attacked us for, quote, failing, close quote, to prosecute an innocent man. We were wildly accused of racism and favoritism based on race and being insensitive to the family that survived and witnessed the terrible attack that accidentally killed their loved one. When the judge threw the case against the wrong man out, no one made note of the fact that my predecessor had actually charged the wrong man, an innocent man, with murder, and incarcerated him for a period of years. This happened in multiple cases. When the facts got in the way of the false narrative, the recallers just dropped that case and moved on to the next one. Throughout my tenure as the first Black female district attorney in Alameda County, the media questioned my every move and attacked my right to use my prosecutorial discretion as if I was too big for my britches. The number of public records requests from the media soared during my administration. We received requests for all of my emails, all of the emails of my chief assistant district attorney, all of the emails of my communications director, all of the documents related to Special Directive 23-01, the resume and job application of every employee we hired over 20 months, data on every case filed by the office, data on the number and types of cases being prosecuted, and data on the disposition of cases, which again, we did not have. Some of the more outrageous records requests included allegations that I was destroying office furniture, Presumably, they were referring to the famous Earl Warren desk, and that I had hired my own private armed security guards, presumably referring to the Alameda County District Attorney Inspectors Division, founded by Earl Warren in 1925. So, what are the actual facts about my record as the lead prosecutor for Alameda County? What did the data show? In our 2023 annual report, we were able to show that we took action on 11,977 police reports. That's almost 12,000 police reports. Working with the California Policy Lab, we were able to establish that the number of reports from police agencies went up in 2022 and declined in 2023. We filed charges on 62.9% of the reports submitted for our review, and rejected approximately 34% of the police reports that we received for various reasons. The percentage of cases processed in the first year of my administration was higher than the number of cases processed by my predecessor in both 2022 and 2021. The number of cases that we filed by charge level showed that we were consistent with the history of the office. One of my goals for the county was to open up the black box of justice for our community. We had weekly press conferences. We published a monthly newsletter called the DA Debrief. We published weekly newsletters called the DA Weekly. We also worked to create a public dashboard with publicly accessible data on the work that my deputies were doing. When someone leaked the information about our work to reduce a backlog in misdemeanors to the San Francisco Chronicle, we shared the information that we discovered about the problem in a press conference and told the public what we were doing to fix the problem. In September 2023, I challenged my team under the leadership of Tara Anderson, the Assistant Chief of Administration and Operations, to give the public a report on the number of cases filed, the type of cases filed, and the source of the cases. Chief Anderson completed the first major step of her assignment in January of 2025, when the public dashboard went live. Only a few district attorneys' offices in the whole state of California have a public dashboard. In the Bay Area, we joined San Francisco and Santa Clara as the only district attorneys' offices to provide a public dashboard accessible to the public. Today, unfortunately, the Alameda County Public Dashboard is no longer available on the district attorney's website. It has been taken down by the new administration, which makes you wonder, was it ever really about the data or the cases or even the victims? I can assure you, I did not destroy any furniture, steal any furniture, buy televisions for the folks incarcerated in Santa Rita, hire armed security guards, or use any authority in my power to extort, coerce, or intimidate anyone. Thank you for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please subscribe as a founding member or a paid subscriber to my Substack newsletter this month to get the weekly word from Pamela Price Unfiltered. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts.